Do that again. Good afternoon, Rotarians. To kick off our meeting today, I'd like for Ed Smith to lead us in the four-way test, prayer, and pledge.
Thank you, President. Please join me in saying the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Please join me in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege to speak freely, live in a free society, pray out loud, and be the unique individuals that you created us to be. Help each of us to utilize the talents in which we are blessed. Help us to appreciate you daily, thanking you for all that we are, all that we have, and all that you designed us to be. Thank you for the opportunity to come together united in the goals of Rotary and working to make our community and world better places than we found them, and strengthen our ability to share our different perspectives while respecting one another. Bless this food to our nourishment and us to your loving service for others. In your holy name, amen. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thanks to the greeters, Don Coe, Ed Levy, Grant Cox, and Rick Fleetwood. And special thanks to Elizabeth Cloxton for stepping in as our Sergeant of Arms today. Thank you, Elizabeth. Next, Pam Hathaway will introduce our guests, and Molly McNulty will introduce and welcome our newest member to Club 99.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Thank you. I am pleased to announce our guest and host Rotarian today. When I do announce your name, please stand up. And at the end of that, we will offer a warm hand of applause to tell you we're really glad that you're here today. So we have Kent Myers, and he is the guest of the one and only Aaron Lubin. And those are our guests today. We are so pleased that you're with us. We hope you enjoy yourself and make some new friends on the way out. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to introduce new member Katie Calvert, and I'm happy to serve as her co-sponsor today alongside past President Kenny Gibbs, who unfortunately can't be here as he's in Marco Island. He swears he's working. We'll double check him on that. Katie, if you'll join President Peacock in front of the podium, please. Katie is a litigation attorney with the law firm of Quattlebaum, Grooms, and Toll. She earned her JD from Vanderbilt University Law School in 2019, where she served as the managing editor of the Vanderbilt Law Review and was a member of the Phi Delta Phi International Legal Honor Society. As an active member of the International Law Society, she participated in the Vanderbilt and Venice program, a study abroad program focused on international law. She also assisted international students at Vanderbilt in obtaining equal access to educational tools and volunteered with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Born and raised in Fort Smith, Katie attended the University of Arkansas, where she graduated in just 3.5 years, obtaining her BA in political science. She was on the chancellor's list and dean's list and volunteered for the Legal Aid of Arkansas. Katie has a wide variety of hobbies and interests, including reading, cooking, felting, gardening, fishing, softball, and interior design. Please help me welcome our newest Club 99 member, Katie Calvert.
Thank you, Pam and Molly. Our new member streak, still alive. How many? 18 weeks straight, guys. Congratulations to Katie and welcome to Club 99, everyone. Natalie Gaddotti will provide us with the Literacy Lab update next. So Natalie, come join us, please.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I am taking over Mitch Bettis's role today to give you an update on the Literacy Lab. And I know Mitch was up here a week or so ago talking to you guys, but just another reminder that we're kind of going into the second phase of our literacy focus. So as you guys know, we've been 20 months in on we had a strategic task force that looked at what our strategy needed to be in order to make a real difference in our city over the many years ahead of us. And we landed on literacy and the fact that we want to ensure that every child in the Little Rock School District is reading by the 3rd grade. It's a huge goal, but we are making a dent in it. And I'm excited to say we did a pilot project this past summer that it was really good. We learned a lot from it. And so that's taking us into this next phase. So starting in January, we're going to have about 8 to 10 weeks where we are in, this is the time, guys. I mean, this is the time to stand up and say, okay, I'm ready to help make this happen, because we need volunteers to help us with 2 schools that are at high risk, Washington and Stevens. Both of those schools, the principals have identified a group of kids. One is 3rd grade that it really needs help in that, and the other school is 5th graders that are actually reading below the 3rd grade level, but COVID was a huge factor in that, and they're far behind and they need our help. So I'm going to be in the back in this corner over here after our meeting today, and would love to talk with anybody that's interested in committing some time for about 8 to 10 weeks starting in January to help tutor these kiddos. I know you've heard Mitch say this, but there's a lot of challenges that our city has, and a lot of them have come to light truly over the past couple of years, and we need these kiddos reading by 3rd grade. It makes a huge difference. If they're not graduating from high school, they're turning to crime, they're at below the poverty level, and it's creating problems for our city that we need to overcome, and reading is the answer. So this is big and we need your help. So please meet me back there if you're interested to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Appreciate your update. Reminder, meet Natalie afterwards if you want to learn more. Some of you may have access to folks in your businesses or your organizations that may want to help. So this is your chance to learn more about it. It's a soft sell today. Just come learn about it. We're not going to make you commit to anything, but we want to make sure that we have a pretty good inventory of all the folks and their organizations who may want to be helpful come January. We're off next week for Thanksgiving. So just if you want to come and hang out in Stephanie's beautiful building here, you can do that. But please don't come expecting to be at Rotary. 42 is open though, right? Okay. You can have lunch at 42. You just can't have it up here. And then the following week on November 29th, we're going to have a special community panel, kind of following up some of the things that Natalie said, addressing how we can work together on some of our most pressing public safety challenges. So it's going to be a really unique opportunity to learn about some of the folks who are on the front lines of helping address some of these issues in our community. But next, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only, our friend, David Basil. He will give us an update on the Broyles Award.
Greetings to everyone. Great to be at Club 99. You guys may be sick of seeing me. I think this is my 3rd meeting in the last six weeks, which listen, I'm very honored that It's the Little Rock Touchdown Club is what a power-packed Monday, Tuesday we have in downtown Little Rock during the fall. The Little Rock Touchdown Club, national names, Rotary national names. But the reason I'm here today is to talk about the Brules Award. This is hard to believe. This is year 27. Now, you guys have kids, I have bronze. That's all I have. I have no kids. And so hard to believe this is year 27. And most of you in here remember there was about a 10-year window where Club 99 became heavily involved and sponsored, promoted, executed the Brules Award. It was so great to work with many of you here in the room and Karen Fetzer. And I remember when I went to Coach Brules and asked him, I said, Coach, listen, I think this is a great idea that we partner with Club 99. And he was, David, if you think it'll make the award better, let's do it. And that's what we did. And I was so proud to have that affiliation with Club 99 because all of you helped raise the bar. And now, again, 27 years later, we've got an award that every assistant coach in America covets. And it's a big deal. As a matter of fact, some of our winners, matter of fact, the guy who won the national championship last year, Kirby Smart, head coach at Georgia, won the Brules Award here. Lincoln Riley, the most coveted coach there during the offseason, just got the head coaching job at USC. So anyway, it's obviously a great award. It does two things. One, it recognizes great assistant coaches in America. And two, it helps supports the mission of the Brules Foundation. And that's one component we didn't have when we were working together with Club 99 is supporting caregivers of Alzheimer's patients. So it's a really neat deal. And I love that Denver came to me and said, of course, you know, Jeff Hildebrand has been my right-hand man now for how many years, Jeff? 17 years of the 27, and you couldn't do it without him. He's amazing. But Denver came back and said, Denver, when he became president, let's work together and bring Rotary back in together with the Brules Award. So we're thrilled about that. The Brules family is thrilled about it. A discounted rate for all Rotarians. And I hope that you'll come. We'd love to have you there. I want to recognize you because you all played an important role in this award. And we'd love to have you there. We just announced the 51 nominees. The top 25 schools in America are all represented. So the top 25 that are in the playoff rankings, the AP, they're all represented. So the odds are our 5 coaches are going to be in the national championship hunt when they come here. So I love it when they announce the 5 finalists, Little Rock. And that's what it's all about. And I would love to have you there. I thank you for what you've done over the years for the Brules Award. And Denver, thank you for your effort to bring this back together again. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We really appreciate you and Jeff and everyone that's been part of this prestigious award for so many years. And I'm, again, excited that we can share that together again as a Rotary family. Again, so there will not be a meeting at the Clinton Center on December 6th, so put that down. You have the option to go to the Brules Award at a discounted price, or you can opt in for one of our fireside chat options. Karen will be sending a link in an email this afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. Please sign up though before Thanksgiving. We need to know what your plans are for December 6th. As many of you know by now, during our La Petite Roche Tricentennial, I will spend my year as president telling unique stories about our region's past 300 years. Today, I'd like to share with you the story of one of the first social clubs in Little Rock. Imagine a ritzy invitation to a Mardi Gras party in the late 1800s, maybe another to a Purim ball in New Orleans, or even a wedding program and dance cards. One such wedding had 16 dances on it. 16. These are all items you're likely to find in Cal's Concordia Hall collection, a trove of more than 24 items donated by Harry Ehrenberg Jr. His family was closely associated with one of the earliest known Jewish social clubs, the Concordia Association. Founded in 1864 by the elite of Jewish society in Arkansas, from whom many immigrated to America during the German wave before the Civil War. The original name for the Little Rock Concordia Club was the Little Rock Club. Mostly excluded from other social clubs at the time, a growing population of Jewish immigrants in Little Rock organized this club. It occupied several locations in downtown Little Rock, including one at 3rd and Main over the years. but yet all the Concordia Hall facilities were available to non-Jewish communities as well. During the Brooks-Baxter conflict, for example, one location was briefly used as a temporary hospital for the wounded. You may recall my previous story on former President Grant's visit to Little Rock. There is one rumor that his ball was held at Concordia Club. This strategic decision by the club's leaders strengthened relations between local Jewish and non-Jewish communities. When Max Hibb, a member of the social club in his earlier years, and William Prost had their liquor distribution building constructed at 409 East Markham, they worked with organizers to create an event space for the association on the second floor. It was one of the club's first permanent locations. Here, members of Little Rock's Jewish community once danced, socialized, and organized some of the state's earliest Jewish congregations. That restored structure is now the Porbeck and Bowman Building and part of Central Arkansas Library's Roberts Library Campus in the River Market. Library officials later named its Concordia Hall Gallery on its first floor in honor of this unique history. In 1903, it dedicated a building of its own at 8th and Scott Streets. After 25 years at this location, it was sold to the Little Rock Boys Club. There's some debate from there. One report says the Concordia Association changed its name to West Ridge Country Club and erected a building in Southwest Little Rock. That would be the club's final location, according to an Arkansas Democrat-Gazette article. But Cal's own research says it changed its name to the Concordia Country Club and built a golf course and club rooms west of the city near Rock Creek. Financial difficulties in the Depression years eventually caused the group to disband. Past President Gus Ottenheimer, of whom our Ottenheimer International Youth Program is named, had a strong connection to the Concordia Club too. His grandfather, Philip Ottenheimer, was one of the original founders. I suspect some of our other Club 99ers may be descended from early members as well. Although statistically small, Little Rock's Jewish population has provided important leadership throughout our city's business, educational, and philanthropic life, and its contributions can't be overstated. Not to mention helping host some of the finest gatherings this beautiful city has ever seen. And that's our Illuminating the Rock story for this week. And now I'd like for Stephanie Street to come introduce our program today. Stephanie.
Well, thank you very much, President Peacock. I was so pleased about a month and a half ago, Denver reached out and said, I'd like to make you to introduce our speaker at our November program. And I said, that's great. Who is it? And he said, oh, I invited your sister Mary Street to speak. I'm like, well, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me know that. I appreciate that. But seriously, this is a sort of a great privilege for me today because I've never had the opportunity to introduce my sister on a program before. And so this is a proud sister moment. So I'm going to read some highlights for her from her bio, but I'm going to take personal privilege to insert some of my own commentary as well, if you'll indulge me, please. First of all, Mary is my little sister. I'm the oldest of 5. We grew up in Russellville, and we all thought that our careers were going to take a certain path. We all were very interested in politics and public service. In following in the footsteps of my father, we all thought perhaps we would have a career maybe in politics, but definitely in public service, and none of that has materialized. But we've done pretty well, we think. We're okay. Mary is a 5th generation Arkansan, a 5th generation lawyer, an Arkansas lawyer, and she's had a really fascinating career, sort of weaving in and out of the public and private and the government sector. And I know Roby will probably dive into a little bit more of that. But Mary is BP's Senior Vice President for the Americas, Communications and External Affairs.
She leads a team from across the Americas, including Brazil, Canada, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, and the United States. And in her role, she's responsible for public policy, government relations, and communications in the Americas regions. She joined BP in 2014 as Vice President and Head of U.S. Government Affairs. And in that role, she oversaw federal, state, and local government relations and played a central role in BP strategic planning. Prior to BP, Mary served as Vice President of Federal Government Affairs at Exelon, one of the nation's leading consumer electricity and gas providers. From 2002 until 2010, Mary, an attorney, as I mentioned, a fifth generation attorney, practiced with the prestigious Mayer Brown law firm, where she made partner before she was 40 years old. So I'm very proud of her for that. She ran and was engaged in their global trade group and focused on government relations and regulatory matters. She also, as many of her siblings, worked on several presidential campaigns. One in particular who won, which was kind of very exciting for our family. She served in the Clinton administration on the White House staff, and she was the Deputy General Counsel for the Commerce Department. Let me say, in her late 20s, Mary was the #2 lawyer at the Commerce Department. Again, proud sister moment here. She serves currently as the board chairman and president of the BP Foundation, as well as a board member of BP America. She also serves as a board member of the Middleburg Film Festival, which is quite exciting for her siblings because a lot of times she'll invite us as her special guest to go to that, and that's always a lot of fun. Mary received her JD from the William Bowen School of Law at the University of Arkansas and was a visiting student at Georgetown. She graduated from the University of Tulsa, and she studied abroad in Vienna and in London, and has, like I said, had a fascinating career. Now, I'm told in some circles that I have a reputation of being, you know, kind of a tough cookie, and I'll take that. But compared to my little sister, Mary, you'd actually think I was one of the Disney princesses. So with that, I'm going to ask Mary and our great friend, Roby Brock, who is here for his second week in a row, moderating a program, to come up to the stage here. Thank you. Very much. Thank you. I'm Eric.
Okay,
Okay,
that was much tamer than I thought it might be, so I'm relieved.
I am I'm impressed that that was not as painful as it could have been for you, Mary. Yes. Is it working?
I don't know. Yes, okay, there we
All
go.
right. We're good. Well, we are, first of all, I'm really looking forward to this. I have for several weeks since I was asked to do this. And Denver, you said I don't have to come back next week and moderate anything for you guys. That's great. All right, I get a week. It's in my contract that I get a week off on that. Before we get started with our conversation about BP and Mary's journey and everything, Mary has to pass the Mary trivia test first. You think you're ready for this?
I hope so.
I think
Let's
you
see.
are. I'm going to put a little incentive on the line here that if you answered the 3 trivia questions about Mary right, you will get some M&Ms. So there's the incentive. It's sitting right there, which could stand for Mary and Mary's if we wanted them to. So let's see how much you know about people named Mary. You ready? All right. What is the best song about a Mary? Is it A, Mary, Did You Know? B, Along Comes Mary, or C, Proud Mary?
Oh, Proud Mary.
Yes, that is correct. Proud Mary by Tina Turner and Creedence Clearwater Revival, but Tina Turner's the biggest one. All right. All right. Actresses named Mary. Which performer named Mary do people most confuse you with? Is it Mary Tyler Moore, Mary Steenburgen, or Mary Kate Olsen?
I was going to go with Meryl Streep because the name is familiar, but
You could do that.
I'll take number 3.
Mary Kate Olsen. That is the correct answer. You got 2 out of 3. You're close to getting the M&Ms here. So, all right. Famous Marys. Who is the most famous Mary? Is it Mary who had a little lamb? Is it Mary, the mother of Jesus? Or is it Bloody Mary, the queen, not the drink, which you could probably wouldn't mind having one right now. So
Mary, Mother of Jesus.
very good. All right. 3 for 3. Let's give Mary a round of applause. These are yours. You win the M&Ms.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Thank
all
you.
right. Yes. You
Okay.
take them when we leave the stage here. All right. Mary, when I graduated from college, I actually lived in England for about a year, and I traveled around Great Britain, and everywhere I went, there were BP stations everywhere, which was British Petroleum. And that was kind of like the Exxon or the Texaco. I think BP has changed a lot since the 80s when I did that. Tell me a little bit about the evolution of BP and kind of what it is today from where it came from.
Well, thanks, Roby. Little bit about BP that people might not know. There will not be a test, but BP and its heritage companies have been in the United States for 150 years. So BP, some of the predecessor companies that people might recognize, Amoco, Arco, Sohio, Southern Ohio. So a lot of history for BP and its heritage companies in the United States. But you talked about the 80s and the gas stations. Traditionally, I think people think of the big oil and gas companies or the super majors, and BP has been listed amongst those for many years. But you think of oil and gasoline. So production of oil and production of gasoline and as well as the gas stations. And BP is still doing that. And we're doing all of that in the United States. We produce in the Gulf of Mexico, in Texas and Louisiana, in the Permian Basin. We're very big there. We have about 7,500 gasoline stations in the US. Some of those are BP branded. Thornton's is another one, and Arco and AM/PM stations out on the West Coast you might recognize. But we're also into wind, onshore wind, offshore wind, solar, biogas. We've gone from what I think many people call international oil company to an integrated energy company. And that's part of sort of this energy transition that I can talk more about.
We will talk more about the energy transition there too. So you grew up in Russellville, Arkansas. Is she the youngest? The middle. Okay.
I'm the
All right,
youngest
middle
girl.
of 5.
Youngest
girl. I mean, I'm pretty sure that when you were, growing up in Russellville, you thought someday I'm going to be working for BP. I mean, a big oil and gas conglomerate, international energy company. So maybe your bio tells a little bit of the circuitous route that you took there, but tell me about BP courting you to come work for them.
Okay. Well, I was going to be a veterinarian when I was in grade school and, very sure of that. And then I was going to be a lawyer. And I did go to law school, and then I actually practiced law. Stephanie went through my bio pretty extensively, but when I came to BP in 2014, I was working for Exelon, which was a nuclear power and utility company, Chicago-based company. I was in DC and really enjoyed that. It was challenging work. This was after Fukushima and sort of learning the nuclear business, and that was
you don't want to mess that up.
Don't
You
want to
get
mess that
right.
up.
Yeah.
But when BP came knocking, it was an opportunity to work for a global company. And I had been in the international space when I was in the Commerce Department and worked as a lawyer in international trade. And I was really excited to be in sort of get back into that international space, but really focused in on the United States.
What do you do on a daily or a weekly basis? Kind of give everybody a day or a week in the life of what you do.
Well, I manage a fantastic team. So the further along in my career, the more people you manage, and I'm sure a lot of folks in this room are familiar with this, sometimes you can do less of the hands-on and more of the management, but I still am very involved in the hands-on, especially in the United States, because I'm based in Washington, DC, a lot of time I spend talking to folks in the federal government about, I would say the regulatory framework and different areas of regulation that some would be surprised, but the BP is very interested in making sure methane is regulated, and it's regulated in a way that allows for technologies to come in and help control methane emissions.
Okay. So maybe explain to this group in here why the rising gas prices were Joe Biden's fault. So just kidding.
So,
We heard
no,
that
that
all
is-
over and over, but talk to this group about how gas prices work, because it's really doesn't matter who the president is. So
That's exactly right. And the price of gasoline, or in Europe, they call it petrol, and how that's set, it can be pretty complicated, but I try to sometimes step back and remember my days in college from economics class. It's all about supply and demand. And we've had some, the last 2 to 3 years, some challenging times, as you will all know, with the pandemic and now the war in Ukraine. And that has really impacted world markets, and in particular oil markets. And then as that flows through to gasoline prices at the pump. But when you think about gasoline and gasoline production, and I'll talk a little bit about wholesale prices, because that's what the gasoline stations are getting their gas or gasoline from, the suppliers. And so how is the wholesale market? Well, the biggest component of that for gasoline is oil, obviously. So gasoline prices, as oil prices go up, gasoline prices will also go up, because that is the biggest component of it. But what usually when we're hearing about it, it's like, well, oil prices came down. Why haven't gasoline prices come down at the same rate? And, it's a little bit like the price of, let's say, flour comes down. How come the cakes that you buy in the bakery aren't cheaper? It takes a little while to flow through the system. But right now we have kind of a unique problem that was brought on by, I would say initially the pandemic and now the war, which is we've got supply side issues, and we've also got refining capacity issues. So oil is still being produced. It's much higher in cost. So that means gasoline's going to be more expensive. But refining, there's limited refining ability. So in the US, BP has 3 refineries, one in Toledo, one in the Midwest and Indiana, and then one on the West Coast. And obviously there's a lot of refineries here in the US on the Gulf Coast. And those refineries are all running, full steam ahead. And so any disruption in that, whether it's for a hurricane or pipeline problems, anything in that with the supply being so low and inventories being so low, means you're going to have spikes in prices, because it can't be produced fast enough to meet the demand.
it's not as easy as just saying we need to go drill for some more oil and get that into the system. And you mentioned the refinery capacity problem. I mean, this is something that ebbs and flows over time. I've seen it when, like you said, hurricanes hit the Gulf Coast. It can knock, refinery out. The pandemic had something to do with the refinery problems as well, if I remember what I've reported on correctly there. And it just that capacity hasn't come back. Explain what's at work in the economy with that.
Sure. Well, there are a couple of things. So during the pandemic, there was, demand went down precipitously. And so the investment in both, you're right. I mean, you don't just bring oil on immediately, especially offshore, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that's a multi-year process. Onshore, it can be done a little quickly, but it's not instantaneous. But refineries, over time, what's the business model for refineries? And regulation can add cost to it as well. People talk about demand going down because of, alternatives. So people haven't invested as much in refineries. And there's also a lot of the excess refining capacity is in China. So in the US, we've had a lot of refineries that closed down or went under during COVID because there wasn't demand. You can't just bring those.
We were all sheltering in place, so we weren't
sheltering
driving.
in place. And people, I think, are just less like, why would you build a new refinery right now? Why not put that money into, let's say, infrastructure for electric vehicles? And that's one of the things as BP looks around and says, okay, we've got $15 to $17 billion a year globally to invest. Where are we going to put that money? And because so many of those investments are multi-year investments, they're 20 and 30-year investments. And so if you think about what's going to be happening 20 and 30 years from now, and what's going to be, how are you going to be making money then? Sure, there will definitely still be oil and gas, but as you look to the future, we see things like hydrogen, we see electric vehicle infrastructure charging, we see offshore wind, we see solar. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I think what a lot of companies right now are trying to figure out is, where do you put that money for that long-term investment?
So let's talk about BP has a goal of being a net zero emissions, a carbon emissions company by 2050, which may be in my lifetime. So tell me what that means, number one, and number two, why 2050? What's so special about that date?
So let me start with the 2050. I think a few years ago, and this is probably 2014, 2015, I'm trying to remember the Paris Accord or the agreement about what does the world need to do to keep temperatures from rising above 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius by mid-century. So that's kind of how you get to 2050. And there were lots of different pledges that different countries, different governments made about how they were going to do that. And there was a lot of pressure, I would say, from investors, from shareholders, for companies to step up, and what role do companies play? And so BP, along with a number of other companies, have their own net zero pledges. And we say net zero because if we still think oil and gas are going to be part of the mix, absolute zero with the technology we have right now is challenging. But we think, there's some negative emission technologies that aren't commercially available yet, but that lots of people are working on. But how do we get to net zero to 2050? And what are we doing now with our dollars and investing to get there? And so that's a lot of what we're thinking about now. And we have interim goals 2025 and 2030 to bring emissions down. And we talked a little bit about methane earlier, but that's
what are some of the negative emission strategies that you say are out there?
So BP has its own ventures arm. And so we're making lots of different little bets. We don't know exactly where it's going to be, but there's and it's not something our ventures arm is in lots of different things. I don't know all of those, but there are things that just suck the CO2 out of the air. And that's, that is one area. But one of the things that we just announced a couple of weeks ago, it may have been a couple of months now, Archaea Energy, which takes landfill gas. And so you've got big landfills that are producing methane. And if you can somehow capture that methane, process it and make it into a renewable natural gas, there's big business opportunity there, as well as taking those emissions that would ultimately be going up and taking those out of the atmosphere. So that's an area that was a $4 billion investment. Hopefully that's going to close at the end of this year. And it doubles our biogas production, and it's 50 landfill sites. And I think we have goals to increase that exponentially by the end of the century. I mean, the end of the decade, excuse me, end of the decade.
Yeah, not the century.
Not
So,
the century.
All right.
Yeah, we won't be here by the end of the century.
No,
Us.
you and I,
You-
correct. So, all right. Light Source is another venture that BP is in, and there's maybe an Arkansas connection in that. What is Light Source?
Sure. Light Source BP, it's a joint venture we have, and it's a solar endeavor where we build solar facilities around the world. So in the US, there are 2 facilities right now under construction in Arkansas. And I think one of them and I hate to say this because we're already in the fourth quarter, but as I looked at it yesterday and I was driving around Conway looking for it, supposed to be online by this quarter, but let's just say sometime next year because of supply
We'll
chain
cut you some
issues.
slack.
So we have a solar facility there, and there's also one in Osceola area, another solar facility there. And what typically those we build, operate solar facilities, and then we'll sell that power either back to the grid or directly to consumers, depending on how it's constructed. And so there's a steel mill down in Mississippi County that's trying to also bring down their emissions. And they can do that by buying the renewable power and using that to make a steel that has a lower carbon footprint.
I'll give you some extra slack on that question too, because a lot of the parts that are made for those solar arrays are made in China, which has not been the place for us to get as much as we need to. We also hear another buzz phrase a lot, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So get your questions positioned here. Energy independence. America needs to be energy independent. What does that mean?
Well, that phrase is thrown around a lot. And I think in the industry, energy industry, especially for big companies, we don't like to use that because if people think that means, oh, you got to have to a completely vertically integrated system. And that would be just US based. And that's not how the oil markets are set up. I mean, it is a global market. So for example, in the US, we have the 3 refineries that I mentioned. Those are all kitted out to run heavy crude. And the Gulf of Mexico is producing light sweet crude. And so it's a mismatch, but that's okay because there is a global market for oil. So what I worry about when people say energy independence, that they think, oh, we've got to have just energy from the US and it's got to be vertically integrated. But I think a lot more folks now are talking about energy security. So, and that really, especially folks in Europe now are realizing, boy, we don't want it to be dependent upon one country or one source. So if you're Ukraine and you're completely dependent on Russian oil, or Germany right now, who's completely dependent on Russia oil and gas, then your energy security is, you've got a problem. But if you're Germany or the United States, but we're pretty blessed here in the United States because we have so many different forms of energy. But you want to make sure you have diversity of sources and supplies so that some disruption from a supplier doesn't mean that the lights go off.
So there's energy security, and I guess I hear kind of somewhat in the definition of energy independence too, is we make more than we need is another way to look at that.
It is.
Maybe.
It's, and in the US, we certainly do. We export quite a bit of crude. We export quite a bit of refined products, but we're still importing, in some cases, we're importing crude from Canada, for example, or we might import crude from other parts of the world. And that's just because we are in this global economy and the global markets are those are the oil markets.
So you get to travel all over the world. What's your favorite place to have to go visit on business besides Little Rock?
Well, this has been a pretty fun trip because I got to go to Russellville this weekend. And but, it's always, to me, I love to travel. I love to meet new people and experience new cultures. This summer, I went to Trinidad and that was my first time to Trinidad. And, post-COVID travel was, hadn't been traveling in a while. And that was just a fascinating trip. And to really meet the local people and understand them better. So I just love any of the next places that I'm going.
Right.
Brazil, I'm looking forward to Rio. I was supposed to be in there in August, and I've been there before, but not with BP. So I will
go in the spring, maybe. I mean, I hear there's a big festival that goes on in
hope
Brazil,
I can do a little carnival.
Yes, be careful for sure. All right, let's take some of your questions. I have quizzed a lot already, and she passed the trivia test, so there's none of that.
Was there any wrong answer in the trivia? I'll be
quite honest with you. I set all of those up to where you could not fail.
Okay.
So, Yes, Mary. Another Mary.
And how your company and other large global companies really are part of creating really long term and really broad scale. And politics seems like, okay, let's rearrange that. And I just would like to hear either of you, both of you, reflect on that. And
You get to go first, Mary. Yeah, so the question is, last week we were talking about elections and politics in the US in particular tend to be, what have you done for me lately? I'm thinking about what's going to happen next week. And in energy policy, you're thinking about what's going to happen over the next century, a much more longer term vision there. And Mary was just pointing out the juxtaposition in those two things. So I'll rephrase the question to give you a shot at it first. How about that? What does it frustrate you that in politics there's not a lot of long-term vision on policy, or do you feel that there are enough people in Washington that do have that longer-term policy vision?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at big investments and long-term investments. And I will say the United States is still the best place in the world to invest. So everybody should just take heart in that in terms of the global, when you look around where you want to put your money as a global company, I think the United States is still the safest bet. And just a quick aside, BP was the largest Western investor in Russia until February of this year, when we announced we were exiting Russia and took a $25 billion loss. So that's what, when we talk about political risk, and we have teams, part of that is my team for the US, Brazil, elsewhere, but that are looking at political risk, and it's looking at it over the long term. So certainly when we're looking at investment, some business certainty is critical, and so the year to year and politics, one party and then the next party, it does make it a little bit challenging, but the things that in this current administration just passed something called the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Bill. And those both have the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has a 10-year life to it, and it has certain tax credits that really are a game changer for the United States. And I think those are the kind of things that give us the certainty to invest. And as I'm talking to our folks in London last week before the election, and they said, well, what if parties change? Does that mean, that these laws are going to change? And I had to explain a little bit about the numbers and how things weren't likely. I mean, we were all probably a little bit wrong about that, but I said, these tax credits typically, when they get put in place, just like the Trump tax cuts will likely be in place for that 10-year life. We think these tax credits have the kind of durability to sort of give us some certainty about making the investments that we plan to do in the United States. I don't know if that helps, but.
Well, I don't find a lot of long-term planning from a lot of government. I feel like they govern from Congress to Congress, if even that might even be too long-term to even say that. I think things can shift quite a bit. So to me, it would be frustrating as a company to figure out how to do some of those things in that respect.
That's why the legal background is helpful, because as regulations get put in place and then new administrations come in to rewind those regulations, sort of understanding how difficult that can be gives you a bit of a sense of, what's going to be long-term, what's legally going to be challenged and likely withdrawn. And so there's more certainty than you think. When you look around the globe, I come back to the US is still the safest bet.
The Mary Street Job Security Act was also another name for that Inflation Reduction Act there too. Other questions? Yeah. So how concerned would should we be that our strategic oil reserves have been reduced dramatically?
So for the United States, I think the question will be, at what price do we refill the strategic petroleum reserves? In the United States, as I was mentioning earlier, we have the abundant supply. So there is, BP produces about 600,000 barrels a day. I think in the US, just on oil, it's something like 12 million barrels a day are produced. So less concerned about strategic petroleum reserve being reduced because we have ample supply, but it will need to get refilled. And at what price do you refill it is it a bad deal? I mean, and at prices where they are right now, you don't want to try to refill them at, $100 a barrel. But I think the administration had just talked about $70 a barrel, looking at refilling there. And this was more about an incentive to get companies to drill more, but not sure that's going to make people drill more at $70 a barrel, but less worried about that. Now, the question that I think people are grappling with are the supply of refined products. So it's the gasoline supply. And we don't have, in the US, we don't have a reserves of gasoline. And so the big concern now with the hurricane we just had, if the Colonial Pipeline, for example, went down, you might not have gasoline or diesel on the East Coast in what's called Pad 1. So we have, I think, some challenges in the US with having reserve, because there's no requirement or compulsory storage obligations in the US for refined products. And that is something that's being discussed. This administration is talking about putting those kinds of things in place, perhaps. But again, you don't want to do that with prices where they are right now, because you don't want people reserving it when the inventories are so low. I hope that's helpful.
You wanted the oil to be negative when they refill it there. So
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. That happened once. Other questions? And I've got a follow-up question too. So there we go, Jay.
No new drilling. Government plans, a lot of other regulatory reasons why drilling is going way down. I'm curious to know how you're so bullish.
So there is drilling that's going on right now, both in the lease sales had been paused for a while in the Gulf of Mexico and on federal lands. The US is unique because now putting offshore aside, because that is all federally controlled, but onshore, Texas, for example, the Permian Basin, one of the largest basins in the world, is that's on private land. So you don't need now permitting, and there's still regulations, but that hasn't paused at all in terms of government stopping that. The question that a lot of people are asking are, why aren't companies drilling more right now? And I think companies, now BP, we've just doubled our CapEx to go into our onshore drilling to $2 billion a year. So we are drilling more, but it's not at the rates that I think governments would like us to see right now to bring the price down. And that goes back to this, what's the long-term payoff? Is that where we want to put all our money, or do we want to put it in some other area? And so those trade-offs are all going on, and investors are basically saying, remember 2 years ago when we had negative oil prices. So chasing the oil price right now for companies, especially publicly held companies, is kind of not as much as governments around the world are trying to incentivize new production to sort of help with this problem of Russia and Russia coming offline, or a lot of that coming offline. And that's why you hear Saudi Arabia discussed and Venezuela possibly discussed. But from the US side, how do you drill more? Companies aren't chasing the oil price as much as some would like to see, and the regulatory regime. They will start leasing more in the Gulf of Mexico. That was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was, if you're going to do offshore wind, you've got to start back on offshore oil and gas. So we see that coming back on. I think they've announced either December or March, a new lease sale there.
Can you advise some clients now with that information, Mr. Gadberry? Okay, all right. I had a quick follow-up question, then I'll come to you. You mentioned Ukraine a couple times and Russia. We all know the disruption that war has caused. Do you have any kind of prognostication of how you see that settling out eventually and a restoration of that energy relationship? Or is it just all a big dark cloud with no real clarity?
I'm going to go with the latter. I think lots of folks are thinking about what happens. Does Putin, how much longer can the current conflict or war go on? And will Putin last that out? And who comes after Putin? I think for investors like BP, I don't see us going back into Russia anytime soon. Now, the question will be, who will fill that gap? And is it a Middle Eastern country? Is it India? Is it China? And who will step in? Because someone will go in and produce that oil. Someone will take the risk. But I think right now the risk is so high that no one wants to touch it right now. But I think ultimately it will be produced.
Yes. So the question is her take on the Keystone pipeline. This will be our last question.
So the Keystone, lots of politics around the Keystone pipeline. And I think for BP, I will say our refineries are in the Midwest. And so there are pipelines that exist right now and that give us a competitive advantage without the Keystone pipeline. But there is any sort of constraint on it. There are constraints right now. There's not enough pipelines. And so we talk about the Colonial Pipeline that takes product from the Gulf of Mexico into the Northeast. We need, and that's, if that pipeline goes out, we're in big trouble if you're in the Northeast and it's wintertime and you need diesel or other products. So there is a problem with a lack of infrastructure, and pipelines tend to be, safer than trucking or trains, which are different ways, or ships. You can use ships, and there's a whole, there are other ways to get it around, but I think pipelines and, siting pipelines is a problem, but it's also siting anything in the United States is a problem right now. New transmission lines to bring, even if it's wind or solar. So across the board, whether it's pipelines for oil and gas or transmission lines for renewable power, we've got a problem, but it goes back to this private land ownership, and it's a good thing too in the US. It's a good problem to have. So it's that sort of, we'll have to keep working through all of those issues as the federal, state, and local level to get new infrastructure built.
Do you think the Keystone will ever come online?
I don't.
Okay.
But because I think it's just associated with too much politics, but I think we need more pipelines, and I don't think the companies that I don't think the economics are there for that particular pipeline, but we do need more pipelines.
Mary Street, everybody, let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Stephanie. Roby, thanks so much. Mary, great to have you back home in Arkansas. We've got a special Illuminate the Rock gift for you this year as part of our speakers gifts. We're giving books to all of our speakers. It's symbolic of the sampling of the books we're going to give in your name and all the speakers this year to our Little Rock School District, elementary schools, and resource centers. So your name's in this book. We want you to hang on to it to remember your time here with us today. But your name will also be in all the books that are donated at the end of the year. So we appreciate you being with us today. Thank you. We've also got you to Illuminate the Rock pen as part of our tricentennial. Remember, next week we're off for Thanksgiving, but join us on November 29th for a special community panel addressing how we can work together on some of our most pressing public safety challenges. And with that, we are adjourned. All right.